here's Brody Brazil.
Well, if you've been paying attention to some of the most trusted voices in hockey media, no doubt across the last several days, you've seen an increase in chatter and conversation and maybe a little speculation about the league going forward with expansion, but specifically the NHL landing for the first time ever in Houston, Texas. Now, none of this is a specific surprise. Houston has been in the mix and expansion has been in talks for a while, but it really does feel like right here, right now, things are heating up. And I'll get to the article by Emily Kaplan of ESPN.com in just a second. I think her work spells all of this out best. But again, because a lot of people are talking about this all at the same time, I feel like there's something more to it now than there ever has been before. Houston and who else, right? Because you're not just going to expand by one. The question is, where do you go from 32, and why specifically would Houston be at the top of that list? Let me introduce you to Dan Friedkin. He's the CEO of the Friedkin Group. They're a company that has recently really got into sports. In 2020, they bought AS Roma of the Italian Serie A. Hopefully I'm getting that right. I mean, I am half Italian. Serie A. It's the Italian Soccer League. And then 2024 became majority owners of the soccer team club Everton of the EPL. What a massive purchase on the set piece. Okay, nobody needed that, but the Friedkin Group, majority owners of Everton, and even as recently as the last, couple weeks or months, and the sale just went through of the Boston Celtics, but the Friedkin Group, they actually considered a bid on purchasing the Boston Celtics, which eventually sold for $6.1 billion. So Dan Friedkin is going to spearhead what looks to be the front-running group of bringing the NHL to Houston, Texas. Emily Kaplan's work of ESPN.com says that NHL Deputy Commissioner Bill Daly confirmed in an email that the league has met with the group, quote, on a number of occasions about potential interest in a Houston expansion franchise, end quote. Now, Bill Daly has also confirmed talks with New Orleans, and Gary Bettman has talked about places like, I think, Nebraska, and was it Cleveland or was it somewhere else? No, it couldn't have been Cleveland. That's too close to Columbus. But there were a number of other cities that Gary Bettman just kind of floated out there. So the league is very much talking about this. They're not hiding this. They're not denying this. I mean, when you get an email confirmation of, yes, we've been in negotiations, trust me, that's a lot of transparency considering the business of the league and how they operate on other things. So they're not trying to hide this at all. And they're also not trying to hide specifically who they're dealing with right now in Houston. Because I know there have been other groups. For example, Emily's work goes on to say Houston Rockets owner Tillman Fertitta previously had conversations with the NHL about the possibility of owning a hockey team. However, it appears Friedkin's group emerged as a more viable option. And that's the thing, right? If you're the NHL, you get to choose here who you deal with. You get to kind of pick the front runner and the bid of maybe who is best suited for expansion, who's got the best plans. There's no necessarily randomness to this. Like the NHL is going to get to choose who they award an expansion franchise or franchises to. So that's according to Emily Kaplan of ESPN.com. For the NHL to expand, and they just did, right, adding Las Vegas in the late 2010s and adding Seattle in 2021. But even as recently as last October, when the league had some meetings, Gary Bettman said it never even came up, the thought of expansion, in the October 2024 meetings. Now, I don't know if he was downplaying it or if the league really wasn't there yet or why this has all accelerated so fast. Again, I think because so many people are talking about this, it's not a coincidence. There are some things brewing behind the scenes. It doesn't necessarily mean that this is going to happen or be announced like in the next weeks or months or whatever. But the fact that a lot of people are talking about it means to me that it's making progress and gaining some traction behind the scenes. Bettman said that expansion was, quote, not a front burner topic for the league. And that still might be true. There are some other things to hash out, like a Canadian national television deal. There's also the brand new CBA talks, which will officially begin after April 1st. So that's right around the corner. The league has some very important things to do, but don't get me wrong. Expansion is relevant because expansion brings expansion fees. And for Las Vegas back in 2017, remember how they did the draft and they got to poach and get a lot of talent, but they also paid a pretty hefty $500 million expansion fee that Golden Knights owner Bill Foley did a lot of negotiation on with the league of like, how much should we pay? How much should we be charged to be a new team? And Seattle paid $650. Well, not dollars. I forgot the M. So I'm not going to go back and fix that, but just pretend there's an M next to $650 million for the Seattle Kraken back in 2021. So the question is, right? I mean, you know how much money you're going to get probably per team. Is it going to be $700 million plus? Yeah, I would definitely think so. So you're going to get, if you add two teams, $1.4, $1.5 billion. And that is my thing here. I think instantly you have to expand by two. You don't just go from 32, which I'll get to in just a second, which is a perfect symmetrical number. They work so hard to get to 32, 8, 8, 8, and 8, and 16, and 16 anyway. A nice even number all the way around. I think you have to expand by two again. And I think you could stagger it again. I don't know if it's a lot for the league or if it's too much for the league to introduce two new teams in a single year. Maybe the workload is far reduced if they say, all right, Houston, you're in 2027 and wherever else you're in for 2029. Who is that other team? Who is that other city? I'll tell you about the front runner in just a second. But they could stagger this. Again, I could easily see that happening, which is different, right, from the way like baseball has done it. They've added two teams at a time in the same season, introduced them both simultaneously. So I don't know that the NHL wants to do that simultaneously. It seems like they would stagger, but we'll find out. Houston, as I mentioned before, is not a surprise. They were always considered a favorite. It's just to see them now emerge as kind of the front runner. It's interesting, right? It's interesting that this has accelerated, that a group has been identified. Houston is one of the biggest markets in the United States right now without an NHL team. So market size, the fact that there's no recent history, the fact that the Houston Aeros were a pretty long-standing franchise in Houston, Texas. They know basically what they're going to get out of this market. There's a lot of population. There's a lot of opportunity. And there's not a lot of question that Houston is most likely to work. But what about the other team and the other city that would also likely be part of this? According to Emily Kaplan of ESPN.com, Atlanta is believed to be another strong candidate for potential expansion. The NHL has twice left Atlanta, as of course you know. Most recently in 2011, when the Thrashers relocated to Winnipeg, they became the Jets 2.0. However, progress was made on a possible return to Atlanta over the past several months. Now, this one I also understand, but I also find interesting in that the NHL has been here twice, has left here twice. Things are different now in Atlanta. They've grown, but the plan, I think, would be to put this team out in the suburbs, well north of Atlanta, like a 30-minute drive north. There's a lot of corporate backing in Atlanta. A lot of big companies could be potential sponsors. I just don't know if you really have the guts to go back there for a third time. I would just hope that all the research, all the understanding, all the security is done in advance, because if eventually and down the road, whether it's 20, 30 years, if they were to ever leave Atlanta for a third time, that's a tough look. That is a really tough look. And I don't hope for that, but I'm a bit concerned over the twice fail factor before and the fact that you're going in here for now a third time. It's an interesting situation. So here are my takeaways. Number one, whoa. We're talking about expansion. We're talking about cities getting teams. What about Arizona? What about fans of the Desert Dogs? I'm going to stand up for Phoenix right now. They just lost their team in a most unfortunate fashion. And it wasn't the fans' fault. And it's not that the market isn't right. And it's not like it's a small city and there's not the right opportunity. It just didn't work out from a business perspective, and that has nothing to do with the players down there, nothing to do with the fan base down there. The business side failed everything else. I think Phoenix and Arizona deserves another chance. Quite honestly, if there is a plan to go from 32 to 36, Phoenix has to be in that mix of 36. I suppose I would understand if they're not 33 or 34, but I wish that they were 34, to be quite honest with you. I would go back to Phoenix before I went to Atlanta. Just saying. And the Houston Aeros, talked about that. You know, there's an understanding of what professional hockey looks like in Houston. Now that was, I believe, did it start out as an IHL team and then turned into an AHL team, the Houston Aeros? But there's some precedent in the market. You know what minor league hockey has done. You know that there's a fascination for hockey in that market. So it should be no surprise. There is a little bit of test sample in Houston for what the NHL could potentially look like. 32 is so symmetrical right now, and I can't get over that. I mean, I like the fact that all the divisions line up and the conferences line up, and there's an even amount everywhere you turn. And so to go from 32 to 33, now you're just going to have one division with one more team and one conference with one more team. And then let's say you add the next team. Well, are both of your conferences now odd numbers, and then are two divisions odd numbers? You're just kind of messing things up. And it's my idea that if you really are going to go past 32, you got to have the idea both in what cities and what sequence to get to 36. Okay, Houston here, Atlanta there, Phoenix when this happens, and what's the fourth city? I don't know. There's a lot of choices out there, but I don't know what that fourth city is. I just really think it has to go from 32 straight to 36. At least from a planning standpoint, you can sequence out the launches. I'm not worried about maybe what is one of the big concerns of fans, that if you start adding all these teams, that you dilute the talent pool of the NHL. I'm sorry. I see so many players get called up, and I see so much room for talent in the American Hockey League that could be brought to the NHL. You're not adding that many more players. I would suppose, 20 active players basically per team. Per night times 4, that's 80 more players plus, all the other leagues. Yes, you are expanding by hundreds of hockey players in the NHL level and at the AHL level to have all the proper affiliates of these teams. But I'm not worried about, this sport is growing, and this sport is growing in non-traditional markets. And so 36 is going to be fine from a talent perspective. From a business perspective, that's for the NHL to figure out and to worry about and to be in the right markets and to not be too saturated in some of these places. I just think you want to go into strong markets. The league is good right now. The league is not really clamoring. At least I can't see it from somebody who supports the league and loves the league. I can't see there's a burning need to do this. I think it's an okay thing to do, and I think it does grow the game. So there's more net benefits than drawbacks. But I don't see this as a really pressing thing to do right now. But I wouldn't be surprised if it all goes forward. But again, the biggest takeaway there, the league's not going to get any worse, player-wise and entertainment-wise, by adding 1, 2, 3, or 4 teams eventually. So the NHL to Houston heating up. Let me know what you think about all this in the comment section below. Also, while you're down there, thumbs up on this video since you made it here to the end. And don't forget to subscribe to this channel. Please hit that button down below so I can definitely see you back here next time.